The coffee shop glowed against December night, frost patterns spreading across windows like delicate lace. Vivian Donovan sat perfectly still, spine straight, hands folded around a ceramic mug gone cold. Across from her, Randall Callahan adjusted his Rolex for the third time, the watch catching overhead light in brief flashes. Randall was 58, owned luxury car dealerships stretching from Milwaukee to Indianapolis. Margaret Donovan had introduced them 3 weeks ago at a charity gala, her grip insistent on Vivian's elbow. He's stable, successful, available. Vivian had agreed to meet him because arguing required energy she no longer possessed. At 46, she ran Tech Vision Solutions, a cybersecurity firm employing 350 people, generating $50 million annually. She made decisions affecting budgets most people would never see. But when Margaret called with that particular tone mixing concern and disappointment, Vivian still said yes to things she didn't want. The brewhouse had been Randall's choice. Downtown, decorated for holidays with garland and blinking lights. Outside, snow fell in thin flakes that wouldn't stick but softened the city's edges. Randall had been talking 23 minutes. Vivian knew because she glanced at her phone when he started. He spoke about properties, expansion plans into Colorado. She nodded appropriately, sipped cardboard-tasting coffee, watched how his eyes moved past her like she was scenery. He hadn't asked one question. Not about her work, her life, nothing requiring her to be more than audience. Then he leaned back, folded his arms, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. I'll be honest. You're too old for every man. The words landed like something heavy hitting carpet. Vivian's fingers whitened around the mug. She didn't move, didn't blink. Ceramic felt solid, the only real thing in a moment suddenly untethered. Randall kept talking, voice unchanged. Most men his age wanted someone younger, early 30s, someone who could give them family, someone without complications like hers. Margaret had told him everything, the infertility, the divorce, the private pain Vivian had tried burying. He'd been honest with her mother about concerns, but Margaret insisted they meet anyway. He didn't see the point wasting time. Younger women existed, more flexible women, women understanding what men in his position needed. Vivian set the cup down carefully, both hands required for steadiness. Her throat tightened. Her chest burned with something not quite anger yet. Being evaluated and found wanting, a sensation she knew intimately. She'd heard worse before. From Adrian, though he'd been kinder, wrapped rejection in apologies and sadness. He'd wanted children, couldn't see futures without them, was sorry but had met someone who could provide what Vivian couldn't. She'd signed divorce papers without fighting, sold their house, told herself she was fine. 8 years ago. Since then, she'd stopped dating, stopped trying, told herself easier this way, cleaner. She had work, routines, a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a closet full of Armani suits, a reputation making men nervous in boardrooms. She didn't need anyone. But Margaret kept calling, kept arranging introductions, kept reminding her time was running out. Vivian had learned enduring it, sitting through dinners with men who looked at her like problems to solve or boxes that didn't check. She'd learned smiling politely, leaving without scenes, driving home to pour single glasses of wine and stare at the city until she felt empty enough to sleep. Tonight, something cracked. She looked up. Randall was scrolling his phone, attention already elsewhere. A text made him smile in ways he hadn't smiled at her once. Vivian opened her mouth. Words formed, something sharp about respecting time, about basic decency, about honesty being cruelty in suits. Then she stopped. Someone was walking toward their table. Garrett Thornton had been sitting in the corner an hour, laptop open, security audit report glowing. Deadline was Monday morning and his apartment was too quiet tonight. Brooke was at his ex-wife's place in San Francisco. First visit in 7 months Vanessa had actually followed through on. His daughter was 7, loved dinosaurs, asked questions about everything. When she wasn't home, rooms felt hollow. Garrett filled silence with work, stayed late at offices, went to coffee shops, kept moving because stopping meant noticing absence. Tonight he'd chosen this place, 3 blocks from Tech Vision's building, open until 11. He'd ordered black coffee, found a back table beneath a bland watercolor of Chicago's skyline. He'd been focused on firewall configurations when the voice cut through ambient noise. Sharp, dismissive, enjoying its own cruelty. Garrett glanced up. He saw Vivian Donovan sitting 2 tables away and his breath caught. He knew who she was. Everyone at Tech Vision knew. The CEO who'd founded the company in her garage 10 years ago built it into something mattering. She ran board meetings with surgical precision and blizzard warmth. People respected her. Some feared her. Garrett had only spoken to her a handful of times, usually during department reviews, where she asked questions cutting straight to problem hearts. She was brilliant, terrifying. Right now, sitting across from a man clearly thinking he was doing her favors just showing up, she looked smaller than Garrett had ever seen her. The man was older by a decade, silver threading hair, expensive watch-catching light. He leaned back like he owned surrounding space, like the world was something already conquered and mildly boring. Garrett heard the last part. Too old for every man. Words hung like smoke. Vivian didn't react visibly, but Garrett saw fingers going white around her cup, saw shoulders stiffening, saw her looking down like trying to disappear. The man checked his phone, looked around planning his exit, already dismissing this meeting as wasted evening. Something shifted in Garrett's chest. He didn't know Vivian well, didn't know what brought her here, or why she sat across from someone clearly not valuing her time, let alone her worth. But he knew what hurt looked like. He knew what sitting in silence taking it felt like because fighting back seemed worse. He'd done it himself, with Vanessa during their marriage's slow dissolution. With people who looked at him and saw only a single dad with too much responsibility, a man who'd started at bottom and clawed up without right pedigree or connections. He closed his laptop. The decision formed before he could second guess. This is my boss. This could end my career. But Garrett was already standing, already moving. Vivian heard footsteps but didn't look up. She assumed a waiter, someone passing, anyone except who it was. Then a hand appeared, strong, calloused. The hand of someone who worked with hands, not just pushed papers. The hand reached across and took hers. Not aggressive, not presumptuous, just steady, certain. Vivian looked up. A man stood beside her table. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair showing silver at temples, jeans and flannel shirt under worn leather jacket, working-class clothes in a business-casual room. His face was weathered, speaking of actual life lived, not spa treatments and golf courses. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Randall. You're completely wrong. She's perfect exactly as she is. The voice was steady, clear, loud enough for nearby tables hearing. Randall froze, phone slipping. He stared at the stranger like he couldn't process what was happening, like the script had been rewritten without permission. The man didn't move, didn't explain. He just stood holding Vivian's hand, eyes locked on Randall with calm intensity, making clear he knew exactly what he was doing and wasn't backing down. Anyone who speaks to a woman like that publicly deserves a public response. And I'll be clear, you're the loser here, not her. Vivian's breath caught. Her hand was still in his. She felt palm warmth, callous roughness from actual work. She didn't understand what was happening, didn't know why this stranger was defending her or what he wanted. But she didn't pull away. Because for the first time in 8 years, someone was standing beside her. Not behind, not judging, just there. Randall finally found voice. This is inappropriate. Who the hell are you? This is private. The stranger's expression didn't change. It stopped being private when you decided to insult her where everyone could hear. I know exactly what I'm doing. You can leave now. Randall's face flushed red. He stood, knocking his chair back. You have no idea who you're messing with. The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm messing with someone who deserves calling out. Now you can walk away with whatever dignity you have left, or I can make this more uncomfortable. Randall grabbed his coat. He looked at Vivian once, expression mixing anger and dismissal. Margaret will hear about this. You're making a fool of yourself. He turned and walked toward the door, expensive shoes clicking on tile. The bell chimed as he pushed into December cold. The coffee shop was quiet. A few people stared. Most had returned to drinks and conversations, brief drama already fading. Christmas music continued from speakers, Piano version of Silent Night, suddenly two on the nose. Vivian looked at the man still holding her hand. His eyes met hers. Dark, serious, but not cold. Something else there, something she couldn't name yet, but made her chest feel tight differently than 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep. Vivian shook her head, the movement small, almost involuntary. Her throat felt tight again, but this time not from pain, from something unfamiliar, dangerously close to hope. You didn't. The man hesitated, then let go and stepped back, giving space. He gestured to the empty chair, the one Randall had vacated. Do you mind if I sit? Vivian looked at the chair, at the space her mother's choice had occupied, at the coffee cup Randall had left half full, like he couldn't even bother finishing. She looked back at the man. He was waiting, not pushing, just asking. His face was open, patient, like whatever she decided would be fine. Vivian nodded. The man sat, folded his hands on the table, scarred knuckles and broad palms. He didn't say anything right away. Neither did she. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was just present. Vivian picked up her coffee cup, remembered it was cold, set it back. The man watched with an expression both careful and curious, like trying to read without prying. That was my mother's idea. The meeting, not mine. Words came out before she could stop them, before she could retreat behind professional masks worn like armor. Her voice was steady, controlled. The voice used in boardrooms when wanting people thinking she was unaffected. The man nodded. He didn't ask why she'd agreed, didn't offer advice or judgment. He just listened. She's been setting these up for a while now. Margaret thinks I need someone, that I'm running out of time. Last words came out with an edge sharp enough to cut. The man leaned back slightly, expression thoughtful. What do you think? Vivian looked at him, really looked. Lines around his eyes from squinting at screens or smiling in sunlight. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble suggesting he'd been up since early morning. Weariness in shoulders speaking of carrying weight for long times. I think I stopped believing I had a choice a long time ago. The words were more honest than intended. She waited for him to tell her she was wrong, being dramatic, that plenty of women her age found happiness. Instead, he said, that's not true. Vivian almost laughed. The sound caught in her throat, came out as something between scoff and sigh. You don't know me? No, but I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, like you've already lost before you even started. Vivian's eyes narrowed. She studied him, saw how his hands rested calm but not careless, saw the pale line on his ring finger where wedding bands used to be, tan line not fully faded though the metal was long gone. You're divorced. It wasn't a question. The man nodded. 3 years now. Do you regret it? He thought about that, really thought, his gaze drifting to windows where snow was falling heavier. Then he shook his head. No, it was the right thing for both of us, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Vivian understood that better than she wanted admitting. She looked down at her hands, at the empty space where her own ring used to be. She'd sold it a year after divorce, used the money donating to a women's shelter. It had felt right, like closing doors that needed staying closed. Why did you do that? Her voice came out quieter than intended. Why did you come over here? The man met her eyes, didn't look away, didn't offer practice lines about chivalry or doing right things, because no one should have to sit through that alone. Something shifted in Vivian's chest, something small and fragile, but undeniably real. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how responding to kindness, not asking for anything in return. So she just nodded. And for the first time that night, she didn't feel alone. The coffee shop had thinned. A young couple sat near windows, heads bent close. An older man read a newspaper in the corner, glasses sliding down his nose. The barista wiped down the counter with methodical slowness, suggesting closing time approached. But he wasn't hurrying. Vivian became aware she was sitting across from a stranger, that they'd been talking what felt like 5 minutes but might have been longer. She glanced at windows, at snow accumulating on sills and thin white lines. I should go. Words came automatically, the polite exit perfected over years escaping uncomfortable situations. She started reaching for her coat draped over her chair. The man didn't move. He just looked at her with steady eyes and said, "You don't have to." Vivian stopped. Her fingers gripped coat fabric. She stood there half risen, caught between leaving and staying, between solitude's safety and connection's risk. She sat back down. I don't even know your name. The man smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes, crinkling corners in ways making him look younger. Garrett. Garrett Thornton. The name hit like cold water. Recognition sparked, flared into something close to alarm. She knew that name. She'd seen it on org charts and email signatures and quarterly reports. You work at Tech Vision, Garrett nodded. VP of Technology. Got promoted 6 months ago. Vivian's mind raced through implications. He was her employee. Not directly, but the reporting line existed. CTO reported to her, Garrett reported to CTO, which meant she just let a man working for her company hold her hand in public while he defended her honor like something from period dramas. You're my VP. Words came out flat, between statement and accusation. Garrett's expression shifted, became more serious. I know, and I still meant every word. Vivian didn't know whether to be mortified or grateful. Professional boundaries existed for reasons. Office relationships, even hints of them, created complications she didn't need. HR would have questions. People would talk. Margaret would somehow find out and have opinions. But Garrett had stood up for her when he had no reason. He'd risked his career, his position, everything he'd worked for, because some asshole was cruel to a woman he barely knew. Why? The question came sharper than intended. Why would you risk that? Garrett was quiet a moment. Then he said, I have a daughter. She's 7. And I keep thinking about what I'd want someone to do if 20 years from now, she's sitting in a coffee shop and some man talks to her the way that guy talked to you. The honesty hit Vivian harder than any practice charm could have. This wasn't about her. Not really. It was about the kind of man Garrett wanted being. The kind of father he was trying proving himself as. What's her name? Your daughter. Brooke. She's with her mother this weekend. First time in 7 months. Vivian heard what he didn't say. That it was hard. That he missed her. That being a single parent meant navigating constant tension between doing what was best for his child and figuring out what was left for himself. That must be difficult. Garrett nodded. It is. But she's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I know I got right. The statement hung weighted with all the things he thought he had gotten wrong. Vivian found herself asking, what happened? With her mother. Garrett looked down at his hands, at the place where his wedding ring used to be. We got married young, 23. Both thought we wanted the same things, career, family, the whole package. But wanting something and being able to handle it are different things. He spoke slowly, choosing words carefully. Vanessa was ambitious, brilliant. She had this fire drawing people in. But when Brooke was born, something shifted. She felt trapped, like motherhood derailed the life she was supposed having. Vivian knew that feeling, though from the opposite side. The wanting, the desperate, clawing need to be a mother that had consumed her 20s and 30s until her body proved it wasn't possible. She left? Garrett nodded, found someone else. Someone who didn't have a kid and mortgage and job requiring being home by 6 for dinner. She moved to San Francisco 3 years ago, got a position at a startup, sends birthday cards, calls on Christmas, sees Brooke maybe twice a year. I'm sorry. Garrett shrugged, but the gesture was heavy. I'm not anymore. Brooke is better off with someone who wants being there than someone who resents being stuck. But it doesn't stop me wondering what I could have done differently. Vivian recognized that wondering's weight. She'd carried it herself 8 years, the endless loop of what ifs and maybes. Can I tell you something? Her voice came softer than usual, CEO armor cracking in ways it hadn't in years. Garrett nodded. I was married 12 years, to a man named Adrian. We met in college, got married young like you. We had plans, house in Lincoln Park, corner office by 40, kids by 35. She paused, memories rising like water. We tried 5 years, doctors, treatments, everything. I did 3 rounds of IVF, hormones making me feel like I was losing my mind, shots every night, blood draws every week. Nothing worked. Garrett was listening, really listening, his attention complete. Then one time it did work. I was 8 weeks pregnant. We told our parents, started looking at nursery furniture, and then one night I woke up cramping and went to the hospital and it was just gone. Vivian's voice didn't break. She'd told this story enough times to doctors and therapists, and eventually to no one. But something about Garrett's steady presence made it feel different, less like rehearsed tragedy, and more like truth she was finally allowed speaking. After that, doctors said it was unlikely I'd ever carry to term. Severe endometriosis, low ovarian reserve. A list of medical terms all meaning the same thing: broken. You're not broken. The words came fast, immediate. Garrett said them like they were fact, not opinion. Vivian looked at him. Adrian thought I was. He never said it directly, but I could feel it. The way he stopped touching me, stopped talking about the future. And then one day he came home and told me he'd met someone else. Someone younger. Someone who was already pregnant. Bitterness in her voice was thick enough tasting. He asked for divorce. I signed the papers, sold the house, started over. And I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need anyone, that being alone was better than being with someone who saw me as defective. But your mother doesn't see it that way. Vivian laughed, but the sound was hollow. Margaret sees a daughter running out of time, choosing work over family, who's going to end up alone because she's too stubborn to compromise. Garrett leaned forward, forearms resting on the table. Is that what you think? That you're too stubborn? Vivian considered the question, turned it over like a stone examined for flaws. No, I think I'm too tired. Too tired to pretend I'm something I'm not. Too tired to sit through dinners with men who look at me like I'm damaged goods. Too tired to keep hoping maybe this time will be different. Words came out heavier than intended. She felt their weight settling in her chest, felt the ache living there 8 years, constant and dull and familiar. She looked away, suddenly embarrassed she'd said so much, that she'd opened up to someone she barely knew in a coffee shop on a Friday night 3 days before Christmas. But Garrett didn't look uncomfortable, didn't pull back or change subjects. He just nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what she meant. I get that. Vivian glanced at him, waited. Garrett looked down at his hands. Vanessa used to say I was boring, too predictable. She wanted spontaneity, adventure, someone who'd drop everything and fly to Barcelona on Tuesdays. And I was the guy who had to be home by 6 because the babysitter had class at 7. He spoke carefully, walking through minefields of old hurts. But I chose Brooke too. Someone had to. And I don't regret that. The honesty was almost painful. Vivian recognized something in Garrett's story mirroring her own. They were both people who'd been told they weren't enough, that they'd failed at the most fundamental things humans were supposed doing: love, family, connection. And yet here they were, still standing, still trying. The barista approached. Folks, we're closing in 10 minutes. Garrett nodded, started gathering things. His laptop, his empty coffee cup. Vivian did the same, slipping her phone into her purse, buttoning her coat with fingers that felt steadier than an hour ago. They walked to the door together. Garrett held it open, an old-fashioned gesture that would have felt patronizing from Randall, but felt different from him. Like courtesy, not condescension. Cold air hit her face, sharp and immediate. Snow was still falling, heavier now, blanketing the street in white, reflecting Christmas lights from shop windows. Michigan Avenue stretched relatively quiet for a Friday night, most people already home with families. Vivian stepped outside. Garrett followed. The door closed behind them with soft clicks, shop warmth immediately replaced by December wind cutting through coats. They stood on the sidewalk, Christmas lights from surrounding businesses casting colored shadows on fresh snow. Vivian looked at Garrett. He looked back. Neither moved, neither spoke. Silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they hadn't said, all the things they didn't know how saying. Vivian felt distance growing, felt herself pulling back into isolation safety. It was easier, safer, less complicated. She started saying goodnight, started turning toward where her car was parked 2 blocks down. But before she could, Garrett spoke. Wait here, just 1 minute. Vivian watched as he jogged across the street, breath visible in cold air. He headed toward a Ford Explorer parked at a meter, old but well-maintained, the kind of vehicle suggesting practicality over flash. He opened the passenger door, reached inside, came back with something in his hand. A single white rose. Garrett crossed back, held it out. The flower was perfect, unblemished, petals soft and cool in winter air. I bought this morning. For Brooke. I give her a flower every Friday, just a small thing reminding her someone thinks she's special. But tonight, I think you need it more. Vivian stared at the flower, at delicate petals, at how it caught light from the street lamp above. Garrett continued, voice steady. Beautiful things don't lose value just because they're not what someone expected. You're not broken, Vivian. You just haven't met anyone capable of seeing you clearly. Words hit like physical blows. Vivian felt tears threatening, tried swallowing them back, failed. They slid down her cheeks, hot against cold air, the first tears she'd cried in public in 8 years. She took the rose, fingers brushing against his. The touch was brief but electric, a moment of contact feeling like more than it should. Thank you. Words came out as whispers. They stood there another moment, snow falling around them, the city quiet in ways it only got during snowstorms. Then Garrett stepped back, giving space. You know where to find me, if you ever want to talk or not talk, whatever you need. Vivian nodded, held the rose closer to her chest, protecting it from falling snow. What happens Monday? At work. Garrett's expression shifted, became more serious. That's up to you. If you need me to keep distance, pretend this didn't happen, I understand. I crossed a line tonight. Vivian looked at him, at this man who'd risked his career defending someone he barely knew, who'd shared his own pain without expecting anything in return, who'd given her a flower meant for his daughter and told her she wasn't broken. You crossed a line to do what was right. That's not something I punish. Garrett's shoulders relaxed slightly. So we're okay? We're okay, but Monday we're CEO and VP. Professional. Understood. Vivian hesitated, then heard herself saying, but maybe coffee again? Saturday evening? Not as boss and employee. Garrett smiled, and this time it was full and genuine. I'd like that. They exchanged phone numbers, Vivian typing his contact into her phone with cold fingers. Then she turned and started walking toward her car, heels clicking against sidewalk, snow crunching beneath each step. She made it half a block before turning back. Garrett was still standing there, watching to make sure she got to her car safely. The gesture was simple but profound. How long since anyone had cared enough to watch? Vivian raised her hand in a small wave. Garrett waved back. Then she turned the corner and he disappeared from view. But the rose was still in her hand and the warmth in her chest remained. Vivian drove through quiet Chicago streets, the city transformed by snow into something gentler than usual. Lights from buildings and street lamps reflected off white ground, making everything glow. She glanced at the rose on the passenger seat, at its perfect white petals, at how it seemed holding light. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it until hitting a red light, then pulled it out. 7 missed calls, all from Margaret, 1 voicemail notification. Vivian almost didn't listen, almost deleted it without hearing whatever disappointment or lecture her mother had prepared. But some masochistic part needed knowing. She pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the car, sharp even through phone's small speaker. Claire, Randall called me. He said you humiliated him with some random man, that you let this person interfere in private conversation. When will you stop being so difficult? You're 46 years old, not 26. You can't afford being picky. Call me back tonight. Vivian deleted the message. She sat at the red light even after it turned green, staring at her phone, feeling familiar tightness in her chest that always came after talking to her mother. 46, running out of time. Be reasonable. Compromise. She'd heard it all before, had internalized it so deeply that some days she forgot where her mother's voice ended and her own thoughts began. But tonight, for the first time in years, another voice was louder. You're not broken. Beautiful things don't lose value. The light turned red again. The car behind her honked. Vivian drove. Lincoln Park was quiet when she arrived, the wealthy neighborhood tucked in for the night. She pulled into her building's underground garage, parked in her assigned spot, took the elevator up to the 20th floor. Her penthouse was exactly as she'd left it that morning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, water dark and vast beyond snow. Modern furniture in shades of gray and white. Art on walls she'd bought because her decorator said it was investment-worthy, not because she loved it. Everything clean and expensive and empty. Vivian set her purse down on marble kitchen counter. She found a vase in the cabinet, a Waterford crystal piece that had been a wedding gift from Adrian's parents. She'd kept it out of spite, one of few things she hadn't sold or donated after divorce. She filled it with water, placed the rose inside, set it on the counter where she'd see it every morning. She stood back and looked at it, at how the single flower transformed space around it just by existing. Something beautiful in a place that had forgotten beauty was possible. Her phone buzzed. A text message. From Garrett. Thank you for not calling a security on me tonight. Sleep well, Vivian. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she typed back, thank you for seeing me when I'd forgotten anyone could. Good night, Garrett. His response came almost immediately. A simple emoji, a slight smile. Vivian set her phone down. She changed out of her work clothes, the Armani suit that was armor during days but felt like cages at night. She made herself a cup of tea she wouldn't drink. She stood at the window and looked out at the city, at snow continuing to fall over Chicago, covering rough edges and making everything look new. For the first time in 8 years, she went to bed without familiar weight of inadequacy pressing down on her chest. The rose stood on her counter, white and perfect. And somewhere across the city, a man who barely knew her was going to sleep thinking she was worth defending. Maybe, Vivian thought as she closed her eyes. That was enough. Across town, Garrett Thornton let himself into his apartment quietly, though there was no real need. Dorothy Sullivan had texted an hour ago that Brooke was staying the night at her place, that she'd seen his car still gone and figured he needed space. Dorothy was 72, Irish Catholic, had lived next door 6 years. She'd become something between neighbor and surrogate grandmother, watching Brooke when Garrett worked late and asking for nothing except occasional help fixing her garbage disposal. The apartment was a 2-bedroom in Lakeview, smaller than the house he'd shared with Vanessa, but big enough for him and Brooke. Dinosaur posters covered one wall. Lego constructions lined the windowsill. A bookshelf overflowed with picture books about paleontology and space and why the sky was blue. Garrett sat on the couch, exhausted but unable sleeping. He thought about Vivian Donovan, about how her face had looked when that asshole told her she was too old, about the crack in her voice when she talked about losing her only pregnancy, about tears that had finally broken through when he'd given her the rose. He thought about his own reflection in her story, the failure, the inadequacy, the constant feeling of not being enough. But he also thought about how she'd smiled at the end, small but real, how she'd agreed to see him again, how her text had said he'd seen her. His phone buzzed, a text from Dorothy. Brooke's asleep. Don't worry about picking her up till after breakfast. You did something good tonight, lad, I can tell. Garrett smiled. Dorothy had an uncanny ability reading people, knowing when something had shifted. He texted back his thanks, then opened a new message to Vivian. Thank you for not calling security on me tonight. Sleep well, Vivian. He sent it before he could overthink, before the professional voice in his head could remind him that texting his CEO at midnight was probably crossing about 15 different boundaries. Her response came faster than expected. Thank you for seeing me when I'd forgotten anyone could. Good night, Garrett. Garrett read the message 3 times. Then he set his phone on the coffee table and leaned back against the couch, feeling something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind. Not hope coming from wanting something so badly you convinced yourself it was inevitable. But a quiet, steady hope that whispered maybe. Maybe 2 broken people could figure out how building something new. Maybe worth wasn't measured by what you could produce or provide, but by who you chose being when it mattered. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. Garrett went to his bedroom, checked his phone one more time, saw no new messages. He set an alarm for 7, early enough to pick up Brooke and take her to breakfast at the diner she loved, the one with dinosaur-shaped pancakes. He fell asleep thinking about a woman with ice blue eyes and a rose that was meant for his daughter, but had found a better home. Saturday arrived with unexpected nervousness. Vivian stood in her walk-in closet at 5 in the afternoon, staring at rows of suits and business attire, suddenly feeling inadequate. Charcoal blazer, too corporate, silk blouse costing more than most people's rent, too formal. Cashmere dress bought 3 years ago, never worn, too much. When was the last time she'd been anxious about a date? College, maybe? Back when Adrian was just a boy in her economics class who made her laugh during lectures about supply curves. She settled on burgundy cashmere sweater, soft against skin, in ways work clothes never were. Dark jeans bought on impulse, worn exactly twice. Minimal jewelry, just platinum studs her father had given her before he died. Her hair came down from its usual severe bun, falling past shoulders in waves she'd forgotten she had. The woman in the mirror looked younger than 46, more uncertain, more human. Vivienne grabbed her coat and left before she could change her mind. Intelligentsia Coffee sat on Millennium Park's edge. All exposed brick in industrial lighting, the kind of place serving pour-overs and taking coffee seriously. She arrived at 7 exactly, a lifetime of punctuality impossible, shaking even when wanting to appear casual. Garrett was already there, seated at a table near the window. He stood when he saw her, an old-fashioned gesture. He'd cleaned up from Friday night but kept essence intact. Dark jeans, gray sweater stretching across shoulders, same leather jacket. "You look different." His voice carried unexpected warmth. Vivienne touched her hair self-consciously. "I don't usually wear it down. I like it." They sat, ordered coffee. Conversation started stiff, both aware they were crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Boss and employee meeting outside work hours. It sounded innocent until you factored in everything from Friday night. The way his hand had felt holding hers, the flower still sitting in crystal on her counter. "Tell me how you started Tech Vision." Garrett leaned forward, genuinely interested. "I've heard bits, but I want to hear it from you." Vivienne hadn't talked about the founding in years. It had become corporate mythology, smoothed over in press releases and investor meetings until messy reality was buried beneath success. "I started in my garage. Literally. 2012. I'd just gotten divorced, sold the house, needed somewhere living, found a rental in Wicker Park with a detached garage the landlord said I could use." "What made you think you could build a company?" Vivienne smiled, bitter edge to it. "Spite, mostly. Adrian kept the connections from our marriage, the country club friends, the business associates. I had a laptop and a chip on my shoulder the size of Illinois." Garrett laughed, the sound unexpected and genuine. "That's as good a reason as any. My first client was a small law firm in Evanston. 3 lawyers, 1 paralegal. They'd been hacked, lost client data. I built them a security system for $5,000. It worked. They told friends. Those friends told their friends. 10 years later, 350 employees and $50 million in revenue." She said it matter-of-factly, but Garrett heard the pride underneath. "You built something real from nothing." "I poured everything into it." Vivienne's voice quieted. "Every hour I wasn't sleeping, I was working. It became the child I couldn't have." The confession hung raw and unplanned. Garrett didn't fill silence with platitudes. He just nodded, understanding settling in his expression. "Can I tell you something?" His hands wrapped around his coffee cup, grounding. "People with fancy degrees told me I'd hit ceiling without a bachelor's from right schools. That community college and technical certifications would only take me so far." "What did you say?" "I told them to watch." He spoke without shame. "I started at help desk, $12 an hour, taking calls from people who'd forgotten passwords. I learned everything I could, stayed late, volunteered for projects no one else wanted, moved up slowly but steadily. 15 years later, I'm VP. Vivienne felt something shift in her chest, respect mixing with attraction. "You earned everything you have. So did you." He met her eyes. "That matters more than what we couldn't have." The conversation flowed easier after that. They stayed until the coffee shop started closing. The same pattern as Friday, but with different energy. Anticipation instead of surprise. Possibility instead of shock. Outside, snow had started again, heavier than before. City lights reflected off fresh powder, turning Chicago into something almost magical. They walked toward the parking garage where both cars waited, footsteps crunching in rhythm. Garrett stopped under a streetlight, snow catching in his hair. "I need to be honest. I haven't dated in 3 years. I don't remember what the rules are anymore." Vivienne stopped beside him. 8 years for me. I'm not sure there were rules to begin with." They both laughed, the sound swallowed by falling snow. Then the laughter faded, and they were just standing there, close enough that Vivienne could see individual snowflakes melting on Garrett's jacket, could feel warmth radiating from him in cold air. "What if we don't follow rules?" Her voice came out softer than intended. Garrett's eyes searched hers. "What did you have in mind?" Vivienne answered by closing distance between them and pressing her lips to his. For a second, Garrett froze, surprised. Then his hands came up to cup her face and he kissed her back with intensity, speaking of 3 years of loneliness finding sudden relief. The kiss was everything it shouldn't be. Desperate and real and full of years they'd both spent convincing themselves they didn't need this. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, snow had accumulated on their shoulders. That was, Garrett's voice was rough. Yeah, too fast? Vivian shook her head. Or too slow. We've both wasted enough time pretending we don't want things. They stood there another moment, foreheads almost touching, breath visible between them. Then Vivian stepped back, suddenly aware of where they were, who might see. I should go. Garrett nodded, understanding, written in his expression. Text me when you get home. I will. But she waited until he'd walked to his car first, watched him drive away before moving. Some protective instinct she couldn't name made her want being the one who stayed, who watched, who made sure he was safe even though it made no logical sense. Christmas morning arrived with delivered food and crushing solitude. Vivian's penthouse was silent except for heating vents humming and distant traffic 20 floors below. She'd ordered from the same catering company used every year, a meal designed for one in containers she could refrigerate and pretend eating over the next week. She worked through the morning, reviewing quarterly reports not actually needing her attention, but focusing on spreadsheets and security audits was easier than acknowledging emptiness. Her phone sat beside her laptop, screen dark. She checked it more often than wanting to admit, waiting for something she wouldn't name. At 2 in the afternoon, it finally buzzed. Merry Christmas. Brooke wants to know if you actually like dinosaurs or were just being nice. Vivian found herself smiling at the screen, the first genuine expression all day. Tell her velociraptors are criminally underrated and T-Rex gets too much credit. The response came within seconds. She's in love, be warned. Something warm spread through Vivian's chest, defrosting places frozen for years. The phone rang an hour later. Margaret's name on the screen killed warmth instantly. Vivian considered not answering, letting it go to voicemail, pretending she was somewhere other than alone in her apartment on Christmas. She answered, I heard about Randall. Margaret's voice carried that particular tone of disappointment Vivian knew intimately. That was embarrassing, Vivian. No, Mom, Randall was embarrassing. What happened after was overdue. I ran into Dorothy Sullivan at church this morning. She mentioned her neighbor, some single father who works in tech. She seemed to think there was something between you two. Vivian closed her eyes. Small cities masquerading as metropolises, everyone knowing everyone's business. He's VP at my company. Oh. Margaret's tone shifted, recalculating. Still, Vivian, a man with a child already. You'd always be second. Second to his daughter. Second to his priorities. Something snapped in Vivian's carefully controlled composure. Maybe I'm tired of being first choice for men who see me as projects to fix. Men who think I need them being complete. Garrett doesn't need me being anything except myself. Merry Christmas, Mom. She hung up before Margaret could respond. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the day. Vivian ate catered prime rib tasting like cardboard and watched sunset over Lake Michigan and told herself she was fine with being alone. But she kept checking her phone. Across the city, Garrett watched Brooke tear through wrapping paper with enthusiasm unique to 7-year-olds. A dinosaur encyclopedia thicker than her torso. A fossil dig kit she immediately wanted using despite lacking fossils in their apartment. A new stuffed triceratops joining the collection taking over her bed. He'd attempted turkey for lunch, following an online recipe promising foolproof results. The bird came out slightly dry, the stuffing gummy, but Brooke ate it without complaint and told him it was the best Christmas ever. They were cleaning up when she asked, her voice casual in ways children's voices got when testing dangerous waters. Are we going to see Vivian again? Would you want to? Brooke considered this seriously, a trait inherited from him. Is she your girlfriend? Would that be okay? The question hung between them. Brooke set down the plate she'd been drying, small face scrunched in concentration. Mommy left because she didn't want being my mommy anymore. Will Vivian leave too? Garrett felt his heart crack. He knelt down so they were eye level. Vivian is different, sweetheart. How do you know? Because she's been hurt too. She knows what it feels like when people leave. And people who know that feeling, who've survived it, they're more careful with other people's hearts. Brooke absorbed this with seriousness children brought to important truths. Okay, but she has to like dinosaurs for real, not just pretending. Garrett smiled. I think she really does. Later, after Brooke was in bed, he texted Vivian, told her about the conversation, about his daughter's concern and conditional acceptance. Vivian's response came quickly. Tell Brooke I have an entire bookshelf of paleontology text. Challenge accepted. Garrett stared at the message, feeling something dangerous blooming in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of something looking like it. Monday morning brought Vivian back to Tech Vision earlier than usual, trying out running thoughts that had kept her awake most of Sunday night. The building was nearly empty at 7:30, just security and cleaning crew finishing rounds. She was reviewing the security audit Garrett had been working on when Kate Winters knocked on her doorframe. Got a minute? Vivian looked up, trying to read Kate's expression. The HR director was 50-something, blonde hair styled in practical bob, professional in ways suggesting she'd seen everything twice and wasn't easily shocked. Of course. Come in. Kate closed the door behind her, which immediately elevated Vivian's concern. This isn't official, just a conversation. About? Some staff saw you and Garrett Thornton at a coffee shop Saturday evening. Kate's voice was neutral, carefully avoiding judgment. I'm checking in. Vivian kept her face impassive. We had coffee, personal time, off company hours. I understand, and that's completely fine. But I need making you aware that he reports to CTO, who reports to you. It's indirect, but there's still hierarchy. If this becomes more than coffee, we'll need disclosure forms for both your protection. The words were reasonable, standard HR protocol, but they landed like cages closing. Noted. Nothing to disclose currently. Kate nodded, stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Garrett Thornton is a good man, one of few who actually earned his position instead of networking into it. Whatever you decide, I hope it makes you happy. The door closed. Vivian exhaled, feeling walls closing from multiple directions. Garrett arrived at 8:30, later than his usual 7:15. Vivian watched him through her office window as he crossed the bullpen, nodding at colleagues asking about his Christmas. She saw the moment he spotted her, the way his expression shifted from professional to something softer before he caught himself. Their eyes met across distance, brief, loaded with everything they couldn't say in this space. Vivian grabbed a file she didn't need and walked past his desk toward the conference room. As she passed, she didn't slow down. Garrett, my office, 10 a.m., quarterly security review. Her tone was pure CEO, distant, authoritative. Yes, ma'am. She felt other VPs watching. Heard whispers start before she'd even reached the conference room. Thornton in trouble. Wonder what he did. Donovan looks pissed. Let them wonder. At 10, Garrett knocked on her door. She called him in, watched him close it behind him, saw tension in his shoulders. Am I about to be fired? Sit. He sat, waited. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. This is complicated. Vivian's voice was carefully neutral. I know. You report indirectly to me. Office politics, gossip, HR implications. I understand. We can stop. The words hit Vivian harder than they should have. She looked at him, really looked, and saw resignation in his eyes. He was preparing, walking away, making it easy for her. I don't want to stop. Garrett's head came up, surprise replacing resignation. But we need rules. Here, at work, we're CEO and VP. Professional distance. No special treatment. No indication anything has changed. Can you do that? Yes. Outside work, we figure it out as we go. No expectations, no pressure, just seeing what happens. Garrett smiled, small but genuine. I can work with that. Good. Now, the actual security review. The quarterly audit found 3 vulnerabilities in the client portal. Walk me through your remediation plan. They spent the next hour going through technical details, firewall configurations, patch schedules. To anyone listening at doors, it would sound purely professional. But Vivian was hyper-aware of every moment on their hands almost touched, reaching for same documents. Every time their eyes met and held a beat too long. The chemistry was obvious if you knew how looking. And people at Tech Vision knew how looking. Wednesday morning started with routine until it didn't. Vivian finished her Peloton workout at 6, weights at 6:30, shower at 7. She was at her desk by 7:15, laptop open, coffee steaming, ready tackling the day. A LinkedIn notification appeared in her peripheral vision. She almost ignored it, another connection request from someone wanting networking into her circles. Then she saw the name. Adrian Donovan viewed your profile. Her ex-husband, the man she'd spent 12 years building life with, the man who'd left her for someone who could give him what she couldn't. She stared at the notification, finger hovering over the delete button. 8 years of carefully constructed distance threatened by a single click. Another notification appeared. A message. Vivian's hand trembled as she opened it. Vivian, I know we haven't spoken in years. I wanted you to hear from me, not through others. Sarah and I are expecting our second child, due June. Ivy, our daughter 6 now, is excited to be big sister. I don't expect a response. Just wanted to be respectful of our history. Wishing you well. The words blurred. Vivian stood up too fast, her chair rolling backward and hitting the credenza. She walked to the window, pressed her forehead against cold glass, stared down at Chicago 20 floors below. Second child, which meant first child was 6, which meant Sarah had gotten pregnant almost immediately after Adrian left. Maybe before, maybe during. 12 years of marriage, 5 years of trying, 3 rounds of IVF, hormones and hope and heartbreak. And Sarah gave him everything in 9 months. What made her different? Youth, fertility, some fundamental worthiness Vivian lacked? The old voices rose up, the ones she'd spent 8 years trying silencing. Defective, broken, not enough, never enough. Her hands were shaking. Nausea rolled through her stomach. She sank to the floor, back against the window, knees pulled to chest, professional mask shattering in privacy of her office. Vivian sat there for 20 minutes, maybe more, until her breathing steadied and the world stopped spinning. Then she pulled out her phone and called the one person who might understand. Garrett answered on the second ring, his voice concerned. Vivian, bad time? Her voice came out tight, strangled. Never. What happened? My ex-husband. He messaged me on LinkedIn. His wife is pregnant. Second child. Silence on the other end. Then softly, Vivian, I'm so sorry. Something broke in her chest. The kindness undid what Adrian's message had started. I can't do this. Garrett. Us. It's too much. Too soon. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. I'm still too broken. You're not broken. He already took everything. My marriage, my future, my belief that I could be enough for anyone. I can't risk more. I can't survive losing something else. Her voice cracked on the last word. How much space do you need? Garrett's voice was steady, trying anchoring her when she was drowning. I don't know. I'm sorry. She hung up before he could respond, before his steadiness could make her believe in possibilities that didn't exist. The rest of the week blurred together in a haze of avoidance. Vivian canceled every meeting not absolutely critical. She worked from home when possible, citing deadlines that were real but not urgent. When she had to be at offices, she kept her door closed, communicated through emails, became the ice queen people whispered about in hallways. Garrett tried. She'd give him credit for that. He brought coffee to her office Thursday morning. Her assistant turned him away at the door. Ms. Donovan is busy. You can email your questions. He emailed asking if they could talk. She sent one-word responses. Later. Busy. Soon. He texted Friday evening. Please don't shut me out. I know you're hurting, but you don't have to do this alone. Vivian read the message 3 times, left it on read, added it to the list of things she was too broken handling. Kate Winters stopped by Friday afternoon, concern etched in her professional expression. Everything okay with you and Garrett? Purely professional? As it should be. Kate nodded, but her eyes said she didn't believe it. Just remember, isolation isn't the same as protection. After she left, Vivian sat in her empty office and wondered when she'd become someone who pushed away the only person who'd seen her clearly in years. New Year's Eve arrived with champagne and regret. Vivian stood at her penthouse window, watching fireworks explode over Lake Michigan. The city celebrated while she nursed a glass of Dom Perignon she'd bought 3 years ago and never opened. It tasted expensive and empty. Her phone was across the room, deliberately out of reach. She turned off notifications, deleted her email app temporarily, done everything possible avoiding the world outside her glass tower. But at midnight, as final fireworks faded and the city began its transition into a new year, her phone buzzed. Just once, a text cutting through all her carefully constructed barriers. Happy New Year. I'm not giving up on you. Take the time you need. I'll be here. Vivian walked across the room, picked up her phone, read the message until the words blurred through tears she finally let fall. She didn't respond. Couldn't find words that wouldn't be lies or promises she couldn't keep. But she saved the message. And she stood at her window until dawn broke over Lake Michigan, thinking about a man who kept showing up even when she pushed him away, wondering if maybe that was what love looked like when it was real instead of desperate, present instead of consuming. The white rose on her kitchen counter had dried but not died, petals holding their shape even in death. Beautiful things don't lose value. Garrett had said that. Maybe he'd been talking about more than flowers. Vivian poured herself another glass of champagne she wouldn't drink and watched sunrise on a year that felt simultaneously full of possibility and irretrievably broken. Some things couldn't be fixed. Some people couldn't be saved. But maybe, she thought as light spread across the water, some people were worth showing up for anyway, even when they couldn't show up for themselves. Friday the 6th of January brought routine collapsing into chaos. Vivian had been working late, avoiding the penthouse that felt more like mausoleum than home. 7 o'clock found her still at her desk, reviewing contracts that could have waited until Monday, but served as excellent excuses for not being alone with her thoughts. The sound of a child's voice in the hallway froze her mid-sentence. Her door burst open without warning. A small girl with Garrett's dark hair and serious eyes ran in, stopping short when she saw Vivian behind the massive desk. Garrett appeared seconds later, apology written across his face before he even spoke. Vivian, I'm so sorry. Dorothy's husband had a fall. She's at hospital. I had nowhere else. Vivian's brain struggled, shifting gears from quarterly projections to the 7-year-old currently examining her office with frank curiosity. You're Daddy's boss. The girl's voice carried absolute certainty. I am. Vivian stood, came around the desk, tried remembering how interacting with children. You must be Brooke. The girl's eyes narrowed slightly. Daddy talks about you a lot. Something in Vivian's chest squeezed. Good things, I hope. He says you're smart. Brooke's scrutiny intensified. Are you? Despite everything, Vivian found herself smiling. I try to be. You like dinosaurs? The transformation was instant. Brooke's suspicion melted into enthusiasm so pure it was almost painful witnessing. Do you know about dinosaurs? Velociraptors especially. Want to see something? Vivian returned to her desk, opened her laptop, pulled up photos she'd saved years ago, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, herself standing next to a velociraptor skeleton during a business trip she'd extended just to visit the exhibit. Brooke's gasp was everything. You've seen real fossils? Many. Chicago has the Field Museum. They have Sue, the largest and most complete T-Rex ever found. Maybe we could go sometime. The words were out before Vivian could consider implications. We. As if that was something she had right saying. Can we, Daddy? Garrett's expression held something Vivian couldn't name. Tenderness mixed with hope, mixed with fear. If Vivian wants to take you, I'd like that very much. For 30 minutes, Vivian showed Brooke dinosaur photos, answered questions about bone structure and extinction theories, felt something ice-covered in her chest begin thawing. The girl was brilliant, curious in ways children were when adults hadn't taught them that enthusiasm was embarrassing. Garrett's phone rang. Dorothy. Her husband was fine, just bruised. She could take Brooke now. Time to go, sweetheart. Gather your things. Brooke collected her backpack, started toward the door, then turned back suddenly. Are you Daddy's girlfriend? The question hung in the air like smoke. Vivian felt Garrett tense beside her. That's not appropriate, Brooke. But the girl wasn't backing down. Her small face had gone hard, defensive. My mommy left because she didn't want me. Are you going to leave Daddy too? The words hit Vivian like physical blows. She knelt down so they were eye level, tried finding words that wouldn't be lies. Sweetheart, I would never want hurting your father. Everyone leaves. Brooke's voice cracked. It's always just me and Daddy. We don't need anyone else. She ran to Garrett, pressed her face against his stomach, refused looking at Vivian again. Garrett met Vivian's eyes over his daughter's head. I'm so sorry. We haven't talked about dating. I didn't know she'd react like this. It's okay. She's protecting you. I understand. But the understanding didn't stop it from hurting. Didn't stop Vivian from seeing herself through a 7-year-old's eyes and finding herself wanting. After they left, she stood alone in her office, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and thought about all the ways she was insufficient. Not enough for Adrian, not enough for Margaret. And now, apparently, not enough for a child who'd been abandoned once and wasn't willing risking it happening again. Even children see it. Vivian spoke to her empty office. I'm not mother material, never will be. She gathered her things, drove home through winter streets, crawled into bed without eating, and let darkness take her. Monday morning arrived with urgency. Vivian wasn't prepared for. She was at her desk by 7:15, determined losing herself in work that made sense, problems that had solutions. The January board meeting was approaching, quarterly reports needed final review, the new product launch required her attention. None of it stopped her from thinking about Brooke's words. Are you going to leave too? At 9:30, her assistant Riley knocked tentatively. Ms. Donovan, your mother is here. Vivian's head snapped up. What? She's in the lobby. Security tried stopping her, but she's quite insistent. Send her away. Riley's expression suggested this had already been attempted. She's already heading up. Said she'd wait in your office if necessary. Vivian felt control slipping through her fingers like water. Tell her I'm in a meeting. Too late. The door opened and Margaret Donovan swept in, 70 years old and dressed like attending a charity luncheon at the Drake. Pearls, Chanel suit, disapproval radiating from every perfectly composed inch. We need to talk, Vivian Elizabeth. I'm working, Mother. You're always working. That's the problem. Margaret closed the door behind her, a gesture immediately putting Vivian on edge. Not here, not now. Yes, here. Yes, now. You've been avoiding my calls for 2 weeks. Vivian stood, tried using height as advantage. I have a company to run, Mother. Whatever this is can wait. Can it? Because Randall Callahan called me last week. He told me you humiliated him publicly with some laborer who thought he had rights interfering in private conversations. The word laborer landed with particular venom, class warfare wrapped in maternal concern. Garrett Thornton is VP of Technology at this company, hardly a laborer. Margaret's eyes narrowed. I ran into Dorothy Sullivan at New Year's Eve Mass. She told me all about her neighbor. Nice enough man, she said. But Vivian, a single father, working class background, you're CEO. You could have anyone. Why settle? Something in Vivian's carefully controlled composure began cracking. Settle? Settle? Maybe I'm tired of men who see me as defective goods, Mother. Lower your voice. But Vivian was past caring who heard. The door was closed, but voices carried in modern office buildings. She knew people were probably gathering outside, listening to the CEO lose her composure. Let them. No, you wanted this conversation public? Fine. Vivian's voice rose. I'm 46 years old. I can't have children. My ex-husband has 2 now. 2, Mother, with someone who isn't me. Margaret stepped forward. If you'd tried harder with Adrian. Vivian felt something inside her snap completely. Her voice rose again, all pretense of professional composure abandoned. I tried everything. 5 years. Shots, hormones, surgery. My body failed, Mother. You could have adopted. Vivian broke. I could have stopped being myself, become some version of Vivian that Adrian found acceptable. I did that. For 12 years, I made myself smaller to make him feel bigger. And he still left. The silence that followed was deafening. Through closed doors, Vivian could hear the bullpen had gone quiet, everyone listening to the CEO's breakdown in real time. Margaret's voice dropped, became almost gentle, which was somehow worse than judgment. This man, Garrett, he has a child already, a daughter. You'll always be second. Second to her, second to his priorities, second to the woman who gave him what you never could. Something inside Vivian exploded completely. Her voice rose again, fury mixing with years of accumulated pain. Maybe I want being with someone who knows how prioritizing what matters, who doesn't need me birthing his legacy to prove my worth, who sees me as a person instead of a walking incubator that failed quality control. The door opened. Garrett stood in the frame, his presence somehow both calm and commanding. He'd clearly heard the last part of their exchange. "Mrs. Donovan, you need leaving." Margaret turned, really looked at him for the first time. "And who are you to make demands? Someone who knows your daughter's worth, which you clearly don't. How dare you?" Margaret's voice could have frozen Lake Michigan. "You know nothing about our family, about what she's thrown away." Garrett took a step into the office, his voice steady, implacable. "A real man doesn't measure a woman by her ability bearing children. He measures by her heart, her mind, her strength. Your daughter has all three in abundance. The only deficiency here is in people who can't seeing that." He paused, and Vivian watched something shift in his expression. Calculation turning to conviction. "I know value when I see it. Your daughter built an empire from a garage in desperation. That's more legacy than most people leave in 10 lifetimes." Margaret's face had gone pale. "She'll die alone." The words dropped like stones. Garrett's response came quiet but absolute. "She's alone because people like you keep telling her she's not enough. That ends now. Please leave before I call security." Margaret looked at Vivian one last time, saw tears streaming down her daughter's face, the professional mask utterly destroyed. Something flickered in Margaret's expression. Recognition, maybe, or regret. She left without another word. The door closed. The office fell silent except for Vivian's ragged breathing. Kate Winters appeared in the doorway within seconds. "I'll handle the HR fallout. Take the rest of the day." She disappeared. Garrett locked the door, pulled the blinds on interior windows, gave Vivian privacy she desperately needed. Vivian collapsed, not dramatically, just a slow slide down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to chest, everything she'd held together for years finally breaking apart. Garrett knelt beside her, didn't try fixing it, didn't offer empty platitudes, just held her while she sobbed. Years of accumulated pain pouring out in gasps and tears and sounds barely seeming human. "I can't do this." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. "I can't be what Brooke needs, what you need." "What do I need, Viv? Someone whole. Someone who can give you more children. Someone who doesn't come with all this damage." Garrett pulled back so he could see her face. "I need someone real. Someone who shows up even when it's hard. That's you. Your daughter is 7 and scared, and she already hates me. She doesn't hate you. She's terrified of losing someone else. There's a difference." Vivian shook her head. "So why would I put her through that risk? Why would I let her get attached just to disappoint her?" "Because you staying through hard parts, even when she pushes you away, that's what shows her you're different. That's what she needs seeing. Not perfection. Presence, bienveillano." The words settled into Vivian like stones finding the bottom of a deep lake. They sat on her office floor until tears stopped, until Vivian could breathe without it hurting, until the world stopped spinning quite so violently. When Kate came back an hour later, Vivian was composed enough, standing, nodding at file folders of disclosure forms and HR protocols. She signed everything needing signing, agreed to mandatory check-ins, accepted consequences of letting her personal life explode across her professional one. Garrett returned to his desk. They'd crossed enough lines for one day, but something had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but shifted. The wound would open, but maybe that meant it could finally start draining. That afternoon, alone in her office with the door still locked, Vivian found herself opening a private browser window. Her fingers moved almost without conscious thought. Adoption for single women over 40. The search results loaded. Hundreds of articles, agency websites, success stories. She clicked through them mechanically, expecting more ways she was too old, too late, too broken. Instead, she found possibilities. Chicago had 3 agencies specializing in placements for single adults. Age was a factor, but not disqualifying. Financial stability mattered. So did emotional readiness, home studies, background checks. Things Vivian could provide or pass or prove. She read testimonials from women in their 40s and 50s who'd adopted successfully. Happy families not following traditional scripts. Children who'd needed homes and adults who'd needed giving love they thought would never have outlets. One story stopped her cold. A woman, 47, single, CEO of a consulting firm. She thought she was too old, too busy, too damaged by infertility being a mother. Then she'd adopted a 4-year-old girl from foster system and discovered that broken people often made the best parents because they knew what it meant needing someone who'd stay. Vivian stared at the screen until words blurred. Then she picked up her phone, found the number for Bright Futures Adoption Agency, called before she could talk herself out of it. The woman who answered had a kind voice, warm without being patronizing. "I'd like information about adoption for single women." "Of course, let me connect you with an intake coordinator. They can answer your questions and set up consultation if you're interested." Hold music played. Something classical probably meant being soothing. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. The coordinator came on, started asking preliminary questions about age, marital status, income, living situation. Vivian answered mechanically, CEO voice firmly in place. Then the coordinator said something making the world tilt. "You sound like an excellent candidate, Ms. Donovan. Age matters less than stability and commitment. Many of our most successful placements are with single women in their 40s. Would you like scheduling an initial consultation? Is it really possible?" The question came out smaller than Vivian intended. "I thought it was too late." "It's never too late building the family you need." "Different than you planned, maybe, but not less real." Vivian made the appointment. Wednesday, 2 days later. Initial consultation discussing options, timelines, requirements. After hanging up, she sat in her silent office and felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Not hope exactly. More like recognition that maybe there were roads she hadn't explored, possibilities she dismissed too quickly. She couldn't have biological children. That door was closed, welded shut, mourned and buried. But there were children needing homes, needing someone stable and committed and present. Someone understanding what it meant being left and who would make damn sure they never felt that way again. Whether Garrett stayed in her life or not, whether Brooke ever accepted her or not, Vivian could do this, on her own terms, for herself. The realization settled over her like a weight lifting rather than descending. She pulled out her phone, opened a new message to Garrett. "Can you come to my place Wednesday evening?" 7, "I need showing you something." His response came almost immediately. "I have until Friday deciding about California." Is this about that? Vivian's fingers froze over the keyboard. California? What was he talking about? She called instead of texting. "What's California?" Garrett's voice sounded tired. "Job offer came through this morning. CTO position at TechCore Solutions. Triple my salary. San Francisco. Brooke would be near Vanessa." The words landed like bullets. Of course, California made sense. Better money, better position, chance for Brooke having both parents in same city. "You should take it." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I haven't decided. For Brooke, for your career, it's the smart move." "What about what I want?" Garrett's voice carried frustration. "What about us?" "There is no us, Garrett. I told you that. I can't be what you need. What Brooke needs. Go to California. Build the life you deserve." She hung up before he could argue. Then she sat in her office until cleaning crew arrived, wondering when doing right things had started feeling so much like dying. Wednesday evening arrived with Vivian's penthouse feeling more alive than it had in months. She'd spent Tuesday in mechanical function, meetings she didn't remember, decisions made on autopilot. She'd gone to the adoption consultation that afternoon. 2 hours of paperwork and questions and home study requirements. The coordinator had been encouraging. Timeline was 12 to 18 months for most placements. Longer for infants, shorter for older children who'd aged out of the cute phase and become harder placing. Vivian had left with a folder full of information and strange certainty settling in her bones. This was right. Not a backup plan, not settling. Just a different path to the same destination. Now she stood in her penthouse at 6:45, waiting for Garrett, rehearsing what she needed saying. He arrived exactly at 7, punctual even in crisis. His face showed the strain of the past week, shadows under eyes that hadn't been there before. "Come in." Garrett stepped inside. She'd made coffee, set it on the living room table beside her laptop. "What is this?" His voice was careful. "Sit, please." Garrett sat on the couch. She could feel tension radiating from him, frustration and hurt and confusion mixing into something combustible. "For 8 years, I've defined myself by what I couldn't do." Vivian kept her voice steady, factual. "Couldn't have children, couldn't keep my marriage, couldn't be enough for anyone." But I never asked the right question, which was, what can I do? She opened her laptop, clicked to the presentation she'd spent 3 hours building. Adoption agency logos, statistics on single-parent adoptions, success rates. I qualify, Garrett. I can adopt. Maybe not an infant, probably an older child, but I can become a mother. On my own terms, without needing my body cooperating or a man validating the choice. More slides. Testimonials, requirements, timelines. She watched Garrett's face as understanding dawned. Vivian, but she wasn't done. That's not why I'm showing you this. I'm showing you because you need knowing. I'm not waiting for someone completing me anymore. I'm not asking you staying in Chicago for me. I'm not asking Brooke accepting me to prove my worth. She clicked to a slide that was just text. Her words, her truth. I'm finally accepting myself. All of it. The infertility, the divorce, the age, the strength it took surviving all that and keep building something mattering. Tears threatened, but she pushed through. You were right that night. Beautiful things don't lose value because they're not what someone expected. I'm 46. I can't have biological children. My mother will probably never approve. But I'm brilliant and successful and capable of profound love, and I deserve being happy, with or without you. Last words hung in air between them. Garrett stared at the laptop, then at her. What do you want, Vivian? Really want? I want to adopt. Maybe this year, maybe next, when I'm ready. She took a breath. I want stopping, letting other people define my value. And I want you making the choice that's right for you and Brooke. Not what you think I want, not what you think you should do. What's actually best for your family. What if what's best for Brooke is you? She said she doesn't want me. She's 7 and terrified. Garrett leaned forward, intensity burning in his eyes. You know what she told me last night? She said I'm the one who stayed. Not her mother, not anyone else. Me, because I showed up every day even when it was hard. Vivian felt something crack in her chest. Garrett continued, voice rougher now. She doesn't need another mother who will leave when things get difficult. She needs someone who will stay even when she pushes them away. Someone who will fight being present even when it hurts. His eyes held hers. Like you stayed through infertility treatments everyone said were hopeless. Like you stayed through a divorce that destroyed you. Like you stayed and built a company from nothing because giving up wasn't in your vocabulary. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. You're the strongest person I know, Vivian. And that's what Brooke needs seeing. Not perfection, persistence. Words settled into places that had been hollow so long, Vivian had forgotten they existed. What about California? Her voice came out broken. Garrett closed the laptop, took her hands. The job is tempting. The money would change everything. But I didn't work 15 years getting here just to run away when things get complicated. Chicago is home. Tech Vision is where I belong. And you? He paused, swallowed hard. You're what I've been looking for without knowing it. Someone who understands that broken doesn't mean worthless. Someone who keeps showing up. I don't know if I can be what you need. Then we figure it out together. One day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people trying building something real from the pieces they have left. Vivian looked at their joined hands, calloused palms against her softer ones. She thought about Brooke's rejection, Margaret's cruelty, Adrian's new family. All the ways the world had told her she wasn't enough. Then she thought about the adoption folder sitting on her kitchen counter, about a man who defended her to strangers and family alike, about the possibility that maybe worth wasn't about what you produced, but who you chose being when it mattered. Okay, the word came out as a whisper. Okay. Garrett pulled her close, held her while she cried again. Different tears this time. Not grief, but release. Permission wanting things she'd stopped letting herself imagine. They sat on her couch until the coffee went cold, talking through logistics and fears and possibilities. Garrett called TechCore Solutions, declined the position, felt relief rather than regret. I need talking to Brooke. His voice was serious. Really talk. About us. About what it means. About her fears. Vivian nodded. I understand if she can't handle it. If I'm too much too soon. Give her a chance knowing you. not as my boss or some abstract threat, as Vivian, the woman who actually knows more about velociraptors than T-Rex. Despite everything, Vivian laughed. When did you become an optimist? Around the same time you became brave enough fighting for what you want instead of what you think you deserve. Words landed softly, true enough to ache. Saturday afternoon found Vivian sitting in Garrett's Lakeview apartment, nervous in ways board meetings never made her. The space was smaller than her penthouse, lived in rather than designed. Dinosaur posters competed for wall space with Brooks' artwork. Lego constructions covered every available surface. Books spilled from shelves in cheerful chaos. It felt like a home. Brooke opened the door when Vivian knocked, formal and wary. Ms. Donovan. Come in. Thank you, Brooke. Vivian stepped inside, saw the tea party set up in the living room. Plastic cups, teddy bears arranged in a circle, cookies looking homemade but slightly burnt. Would you like tea? I would love some. They sat on the floor. Vivian accepted a cup of imaginary tea, complimented a teddy bear's dress, waited for Brooke setting the pace. I was mean to you. The girl's voice was small, uncertain. You were honest. That's more important. Daddy says honesty matters. He's right about that. Brooke poured more invisible tea, careful with ritual. I don't want you being my new mommy. The words should have hurt. Instead, Vivian felt relief. Okay, I don't want being your new mommy either. Brooke's head came up, surprise replacing wariness. You don't? You already have a mother. She just can't be what you need right now. That's not your fault, and it's not mine. But I'd really like being your friend, if you'll let me. Friends don't leave as much as mommies do? The question held the weight of a 7-year-old's entire worldview. Good friends stay, even when it's hard, even when you're angry or scared or pushing them away. They stay because that's what friendship means. Brooke considered this seriously. Do you really like dinosaurs? Or were you just being nice? Vivian smiled. Really, truly. Want knowing my favorite museum? She told Brooke about the Field Museum, about Sue the T-Rex standing 3 stories tall, about the fossil preparation lab where you could watch scientists working on real bones. Brooke's eyes grew wider with each detail. Can we go tomorrow? The question burst out before Brooke could contain it. Garrett appeared in the doorway, having watched the entire exchange. If Vivian wants taking you. Brooke turned to Vivian, hope naked on her small face. Will you? Absolutely. Tomorrow. We'll spend the whole day if you want. Then softer, Vivian, Thawa. That's a hard name. Can I call you Viv? Something in Vivian's chest expanded, warm and unfamiliar. I'd like that very much. Sunday at the Field Museum brought wonder Vivian had forgotten was possible. Brooke pressed her face against glass, staring at Sue's massive skull, firing questions faster than Vivian could answer them. How many teeth? How old was Sue when she died? Why did they name her Sue? Garrett walked beside them, hands in pockets, watching his daughter come alive in ways he hadn't seen since Vanessa left, watching Vivian answer each question seriously, never talking down, treating Brooke like the intelligent person she was. They spent 6 hours at the museum, saw the fossil prep lab, touched a real Triceratops horn, watched the 3D documentary about dinosaur extinction, ate overpriced grilled cheese in the cafeteria, and talked about whether birds were really descended from dinosaurs. On the walk back to the parking garage, Brooke reached up and took both their hands, swung between them, happy and unself-conscious. This is the best day ever. Her voice carried pure joy. Garrett met Vivian's eyes over his daughter's head. Yeah, it really is. Monday found Vivian back at Tech Vision, facing aftermath of her mother's public confrontation. Kate had done damage control, but gossip still circulated. The CEO had a meltdown. Something about her ex-husband. That VP Thornton defended her. Vivian called an all-hands meeting, stood in front of 350 employees, and addressed it directly. What happened last week was unprofessional. I apologize for disrupting the workplace. But I want being clear. Personal struggles don't make someone less capable of leadership. They make us human. She paused, met eyes across the room. I've disclosed a relationship with VP Thornton to HR. We're following all protocols. If anyone has concerns, my door is open. Garrett's door is open. Kate's door is definitely open. Scattered laughter. The tension broke slightly. Now let's get back to work. We have a product launch in 6 weeks and I need everyone focused. They dispersed, returned to their desks. The gossip would continue, but at least now it was out in the open. Garrett caught her eye across the bullpen. Small smile, private, then back to work. Professional distance, but with warmth underneath. Weeks blurred past in careful steps. Vivian attended Brooke's school play, terrible production of The Wizard of Oz, where half the kids forgot lines. But Brooke played a munchkin with serious dedication, and Vivian clapped louder than anyone. They went to museums every other weekend: natural history, science and industry, the planetarium. Brooke soaking up knowledge like a sponge, Vivian remembering what it felt like being curious about the world. Garrett came to Vivian's penthouse for dinner. They cooked together, something neither was particularly good at, laughing over burnt vegetables and undercooked pasta, learning each other's rhythms in kitchens and bedrooms and quiet spaces between. And through it all, Vivian worked with Bright Futures Adoption Agency. Home study completed, background check passed, references submitted. She was approved as a prospective parent, placed on the waiting list for children ages 4 to 8. The caseworker explained it would take time. Matches needed being right, not just fast. Vivian nodded, patient in ways she'd never been about anything else. June arrived with heat and humidity and an orientation meeting for prospective parents. Vivian sat in a community center conference room, listening to social workers explain realities of foster care adoption, the trauma children carried, the behavioral challenges, the commitment required. She glanced toward the back of the room. Garrett and Brooke had come for support, sitting quietly in the last row. Brooke gave her a thumbs up. Garrett smiled. After the meeting, they walked through Millennium Park. The bean reflected distorted versions of themselves, funhouse mirrors showing futures that might be possible. How do you feel? Garrett's voice was careful, terrified, excited, like I'm standing on the edge of something that's going to change everything. Vivian paused. Ready? Brooke tugged on her hand. When you get your daughter, can I teach her about dinosaurs? The casual certainty in the girl's voice, the assumption that this would happen, that there would be a daughter, that they'd all be in it together. I think she'd love that. They got ice cream from a vendor cart, sat on grass, watched tourists take photos with the Chicago skyline as backdrop. An ordinary June day that felt extraordinary because they were choosing it together. Vivian looked at Garrett, at Brooke, at the city she'd built her life in. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, sitting in a coffee shop, while a man told her she was too old. Believing him, believing all the voices saying her value was tied to her fertility, her youth, her ability being what someone else needed instead of who she was. She thought about Garrett finding her in that moment, not rescuing, not saving, just seeing, holding up a mirror, reflecting worth instead of damage. She thought about Brooke learning that friends stayed, about herself learning that families could be built from intention instead of biology. Her phone buzzed. A text from the adoption agency. A match was being considered. A 4-year-old girl in the system needing permanent placement. More information would come next week. Vivian read the message twice. Let the words settle into her bones like truth. She'd spent 8 years believing she was too old, too broken, too late. But some things were worth waiting for. Some families weren't born. They were built from broken pieces that fit together in unexpected ways. And some love stories didn't start with perfection. They started with 2 people choosing to heal together, to show up when it was hard, to believe that worth came from presence rather than production. Beautiful things don't lose value because they're not what someone expected. Garrett had told her that the first night. She thought he was talking about flowers. He'd been talking about second chances, about women who built empires from garages, about men who climbed from help desks to executive offices, about children who survived abandonment and found families that chose them deliberately, about all of them learning that enough was never about what you could produce. It was about who you were when production failed, how you rebuilt, whether you stayed. Vivian looked at the text message one more time, then showed it to Garrett. His eyes lit up. Are you ready for this? Vivian looked at Brooke, who was watching them with curiosity. She thought about everything that had brought her here, all the pain and failure and rebuilding. Yeah, I think I am. Garrett pulled her close. Brooke wedged herself between them. The 3 of them sat on the grass in Millennium Park, ice cream melting in the June sun, and watched the city move around them. And for the first time in 8 years, Vivian felt complete. Not because someone else completed her, but because she'd finally learned she'd been whole all along, just waiting for the right people to see it.